the Feast of Masks. When Loki entered the holy banquet, the lies stood up to greet him. The city beyond the gate of Ahll was dressed like gilt with money, gold balconies, perfumed air, silk hanging from every arch like somebody had strangled honesty and turned the body into decor. At the center stood the Hall of Faces, where the High Ones gathered once a year to renew the illusion that they were noble, sacred, and deeply concerned about the public, while privately feeding on it like jeweled leeches with excellent posture. This was called tradition. Humans do adore giving predation a respectable title. Inside the hall, kings sat beside priests, judges beside merchants, scholars beside executioners, polished into statesmen. Everybody wore masks. Not common festival masks either. These were carved from ivory, gold, silver, lacquered bone, and imported vanity. Each mask was enchanted to show the wearer not as they were, but as they wished to be remembered. Merciful, just, chosen, wise, holy. A whole room full of professionally curated fraud. At the center of the feast sat the mirror bowl, black as old blood, filled with star water and ash. One by one, the guests stepped forward, touched the bowl, and declared their chosen lie. I am protector. The bowl shimmered. I am servant of truth. The bowl glowed. I am humble. That one nearly made the air choke. Then Loki arrived with no mask at all. That, more than murder or theft or blasphemy, was what truly offended the room. A chamberlain in peacock silk blocked the way and lifted his chin like a man who had never been slapped by consequence. State your rank. Loki looked him over. I outrank your decor. The chamberlain blinked. That is not an office. Neither is moral superiority, Loki said, stepping past him, and yet here you all are wearing it. A few nervous laughs escaped from the servants. The kind people try to hide because truth is funny until it notices your table too. At the high dais sat the 9 keepers of continuity, the ones who decided which sins became policy, which theft became inheritance, which cruelty became law, and which corpse would be called unfortunate instead of murdered. They wore smooth white masks with no mouths. Appropriate. They had not spoken honestly in years. The tallest keeper leaned forward. You are not welcome. Loki smiled. Then your security is symbolic, just like your virtue. The music died. You could feel the room trying not to understand what had just walked in. That is how corruption behaves when confronted. First it squints, then it clutches pearls, then it starts screaming about order. This feast preserves civilization, said another keeper. Loki laughed, soft and mean. No, it preserves branding. Civilization is what survives after the people still choose not to become beasts. That landed badly, which is to say perfectly. Then the mirror bowl cracked, just once, a thin sound, sharp, delicate, fatal. Every head turned. A priest stepped back. A noblewoman gripped her goblet so hard her rings clicked. One merchant whispered a prayer to a god he had probably underpaid. The star water trembled, and then it began to reveal. Not reflections, receipts. Above the smiling priest appeared the faces of the desperate. He turned away while building a 6th sanctuary wing in his own honor. Above the merchant appeared ships, chains, ledgers, and hands worked down to the bone while he called it industry. Above the judge appeared a scale stuffed with favors, bribes, and cousinly obligations. Above the matron of the city appeared the maids she starved, the daughters she sold into good arrangements, and the husbands she buried with theatrical tears and very efficient paperwork. The room erupted. This is sorcery! Loki turned toward the shouting lord. Everything looks like sorcery when you've spent your life avoiding basic pattern recognition. Panic moved quick now. The elite looked everywhere except upward, because the truth had developed the poor taste to hover directly above their heads. Then the masks started sticking. That was the beautiful part. The merciful man clawed at his golden face and found it fused to skin. The humble scholar discovered her silver mask had sealed over her eyes. The patriot felt the lion carved into his mask turn inward, its teeth pressing slowly into his own mouth. The gracious hostess opened her lips to command the room and coughed up pearls. No curse had been cast. The masks were simply finishing what their owners had started. A lie repeated long enough becomes architecture. Wear it too long, and eventually the building files for ownership of the tenant. Help us, someone cried. Loki's face changed then. Not into pity, into that colder thing truth sometimes wears when it gets tired of pretending this is all surprising. I did help you, he said. So did every fool you mocked, every child you silenced, every servant you ignored, every exile, every black sheep, every woman you called unstable because she could smell deception under perfume. You were warned for years. You just prefer your warnings dead, poor, or discredited. That shut the room up. Because there it was, the oldest scam in any empire. Call the honest person crazy, then ask why nobody told you. At the back of the hall stood a serving girl holding a tray of pomegranates. No jewels, no title, no mask. She had been invisible all evening, which in that room meant she was probably the wisest soul present. Loki looked at her. What do you see? She answered without trembling. A city that mistook performance for character. Loki grinned. Disgusting. Correct. Promising. He took a pomegranate from her tray and hurled it into the mirror bowl. The bowl shattered. Star water burst across the floor, racing around sandals and silk hems, dragging illusions down with it. Paint ran, powders smeared, glamour failed, voices cracked. Every polished mask in the room became a wet confession. No one looked holy anymore. Some looked monstrous. Some looked ordinary. A few looked relieved, which was the most tragic thing of all. Because once the pretending broke, a handful of them could finally breathe. That is the nasty little secret nobody tells at court. Exposure is humiliating, yes. It is also the first honest inhale some people have taken in decades. The 9 keepers rose as one, robes trembling. You have doomed the city, hissed the tallest. Loki stepped onto the banquet table, crushing sugared figs and ceremonial roses under his boots. No, he said, I have doomed your version of it. There's a difference. One is a parasite. The other may still learn to stand. The eastern windows began to crack with dawn. The servants were no longer bowing. The musicians had stopped pretending not to notice. Even the walls seemed to relax, as if the building itself was exhausted from holding up so much theatre. The pomegranate girl spoke again. What happens now? Loki looked around at the wreckage. Now comes the part everyone hates. Judgment? Worse, he said. Repair. She almost smiled. Loki hopped down from the table and walked through the flooding starlight toward the broken doors. Behind him, titles were failing. Alliances were rotting in real time. Men who had built their entire lives on being untouchable were discovering the terrible inconvenience of evidence. At the threshold, he turned once more. A mask is a tool, he said. Sometimes it helps the wounded survive. Sometimes it shelters the unfinished self. But when the mask begins eating the face, when image devours spirit, when reputation drinks the blood of truth, tear it off. Even if it takes skin with it. Better an ugly truth than a beautiful coffin. No one answered. They were too busy meeting themselves. And Loki, patron saint of the side-eye, the exposed wire, the sacred disruption nobody asked for but everybody needed, walked back toward the gate of Ahll, smiling like a man leaving a dinner party after finally saying what everyone smelled. Behind him, the Hall of Faces did not burn. It did something worse. It remained standing. So the living would have to rebuild it honestly. Cruel little miracle, that. Because destruction is dramatic, repair is sacred labor, and most people would rather survive an apocalypse than apologize correctly. So ended the Feast of Masks. Not with thunder. Not with war. With the unbearable comedy of powerful people discovering that their costumes had started telling on them. And the deeper lesson slipped through the city like a knife in velvet. A lie can wear gold for 1,000 years and still be a lie. A soul can stand naked for 1 second in truth and terrify an empire. That is why they fear the trickster. He does not merely expose the game. He makes the players visible without their costumes. And for many, that is the first real judgment.
Until next time, your Sea-Star Curacy, channeled by 3611027, the Beautiful Whisperer. Our Sea-Star Devalan CO. Apply the news you can use.
Scroll, the Feast of Masks is a ruthless descent into the holy banquet of fraud, where Loki crashes the room, exposes the polished predators, and reminds the collective that some crowns are just fancy lids on rotten minds. Not everyone wearing light carries it. Some people decorate their hunger and call it leadership. Take the mask off early before it starts eating your face. Truth may ruin the party, but it saves the soul.
To our beautiful collective, From our day ones to every new soul joining this journey, we love and appreciate you deeply. You've turned this space into so much more than a community. You've made it a family. Thank you, truly. Your presence, your energy, and even the smallest acts of kindness have the power to shift the compass for many in ways unseen but deeply felt. Here's to each of you, all new and the many more to come. We're just getting started, and we're so grateful you're here with us. With love and infinite appreciation from the collective of Shaman Ahll.